From the Blackbird Studios in sunny North Cambridge, it's the RaveX 10-minute podcast. And now, it's episode 4, and he's your only hope, so you're pretty much screwed. RaveX.
All right, thank you so much, T-Money, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for T-Money with a episode 4 New Hope reference. Yeah, when I was younger, I had a Darth Maul double-sided, double-edged red lightsaber. T-Money, I have to show you a picture of that?
That is so JV, bro.
Anyway, my name's RaveX. It's a RaveX 10-minute podcast. Man, we're sorry we had to take a week off last week due to some technical issues I had going on. But it's all right, man, because you know what? I'm no Rick Rubin. I'm just a dumb guy with a dumb podcast. But you know what? You guys love it, and I love you guys for loving it. So make sure you click the thumbs up button, subscribe, listen on YouTube, check us out on Facebook. All that stupid shit that every other stupid podcaster tells you to do. Anyway, I figured this week we're going to get into some indie flicks, some documentaries. You know, a lot of people will see the big budget movies that come out all the time, but there are a lot of other sort of smaller movies that people really don't get to see that's on Netflix, and your boy Rave watches these movies so you don't have to. But then again, maybe you should go back and check these out, man. So, the first movie I want to talk about is really cool, man. It's a documentary about this bass player. I think he's out of Miami. His name was Jaco Pastorius. I've never heard of this guy before, but he's like the Cliff Burton, the Flea from the Chili Peppers, Geddy Lee, Les Claypool. He was all these things before these people kind of did these things, man. And, you know, those guys, they're a lot older than I am. Well, they're a little bit older than I am. So they've heard of this guy. And I was listening to an interview with Rob Trujillo from Metallica, and he was talking about this documentary he was doing about this guy, Jaco. I thought, what a funny name, Jaco. Who is this guy? I've never heard of this guy. And they were just talking about his life and his story. And anyway, there's a documentary on Netflix. If you type in Jaco, you'll see it. And his dad was like a Cuban big band musician guy, I believe, and he grew up playing different instruments. And he played bass on a lot of albums, man. You probably heard him and didn't even know you were listening to him. You know, like the late 70s and the 80s. And this guy, when you see him play, you know, he holds his bass. If you ever seen a really good bass player or a really good guitar player, they're super delicate with their instrument, man. They hold that guitar or they hold that bass like they're cradling a newborn baby, you know, and he touches the strings real delicately, and he gets these sounds out of it, you know what I mean? And he gets, like, harmonics, and he'll lightly brush the strings of the bass and turn the volume up and down. Far better musician than me, man, but we can always hope to aspire to be something as good as this guy. So the documentary is called Jaco, and unfortunately, man, he's not with us anymore. A little bit of a sad ending. He fell on hard times, man, you know, as a lot of musicians do, and he had some mental issues, and back then it was like if you were just a little kooky, you know, no one really got you the help that you needed, and he was a little maybe schizophrenic or something, maybe manic depressive, but some serious issues with Mr. Jaco Pastorius. He ended up homeless. He was living in a park for a while. He couldn't get a gig. You know, everyone agreed that he was one of the best bass players out there, but he just became so hard to deal with and was a little crazy. You know, married, had a wife, had a few kids, and the way he died was super fucked up, man, because it wasn't like the generic he OD'd on heroin or whatever, he died in a plane crash, you know. He went to go see Carlos Santana at a club in New York, and I believe he was, like, sleeping in Central Park at the time, and he went to the club, and he wanted to hop on stage because, you know, he liked Carlos Santana, and the bouncers grabbed him and, like, beat the crap out of him, man. They literally beat him to death, you know, dragged him outside the club and just beat the crap out of him. They didn't know who he was, you know. He's been out of the spotlight for a while. And unfortunately, he died, man. In the documentary, it's really sad because you're hoping it's got a happy ending, you know. But what they do show you, one of the last scenes, it's not a spoiler. I already told you he had kids. They show a close-up of a bass, and you think it's him. You think it's, you know, some stock footage of him playing bass. Because the finger techniques and the way this person is playing looks just like Jaco, you know? And the camera kind of pulls back, and it's his fucking son, dude. His son's like 25 years old or something, and you're like, damn, the awesome bass playing has been passed down to his son, man. And as a wise man once said, his father had it, Jaco had it, And now his son has it, man. So anyway, check out that documentary. It's really, really good. And it's another movie I saw. This one was kind of fucked up and freaky, man. It's about this guy. He was like on death row for a really long time. But it turns out he didn't do the crime that he was accused of. And it's just a still shot of him telling his story. Oh, by the way, it's called Fear of 13 or The Fear of the Number 13 or something, which is kind of weird because it's just something he read about when he was in jail. And he tells his story, man, from the beginning of his life all the way to how he ended up getting out of prison. You know, he was on death row. He, like, stole a car. He wrestled with a cop. He was addicted to drugs and stuff like that, man. He had a head full of bad wiring, man. But in jail, he read a lot of books and became a really smart guy. And he couldn't take the, you know, being in solitary and being on death row. And he kept trying to get out of jail. And so finally, he just writes a letter saying, hey, look, if you're going to kill me, then kill me now, you know? This was right around the time that, like, DNA testing was just starting to come to the forefront, right, of, like, you know, a lot of convictions were getting overturned because of DNA evidence. So he made kind of a last plea, and they got the DNA evidence. And it was this whole long thing, man. It took, like, 9 years for him to get them to go and get the DNA test done. And at first they were like, we're not going to fucking test this out, you killer. And they lost the original, you know, evidence and stuff because a woman had been killed. And originally his plan was, if I tell them some information about this murder and maybe I pawn it off on this old drug addict I used to know, maybe they'll cut my sentence down. And that was his plan, but it backfired because he thought that old drug addict was still out there using. And the guy had actually turned his life around and found God. And when he went and interviewed this guy, it turns out that he had a wife and kids and was nowhere near this crime. So the guy in the documentary looked really bad for him. And they said, well, the only way you would have known about this crime is if you did it. And then that's how he ended up getting the death penalty and shit like that. And really, he had just read a bunch of newspapers and stuff. And that's how he knew about it. So that's how he ended up on death row. Long story short, man, they do the DNA testing. And it comes back that he was not there. And then he was sort of absolved of all wrongdoing. And since he had already served like 20-something years, you know, he had another like 5 years to go or whatever. And then they let him out. But when you see this guy tell the story, man, the way he talks, you know, the pain on his face, the emotions. And he's telling you stuff from a kid to this when he was tweaked out on methamphetamines and shit. And just... you know, how he read 1,000 books in like 3 years and really, you know, made a better person out of himself. And at one point when they were going to turn over his sentence and all that stuff, and they, you know, he was found innocent, they took him out of his cell where he had his artwork and he had 100 books that he would read and all this stuff. And they put him in the cell by himself. And what they told him was, a lot of times when someone's in jail and they're innocent, they try to get back at the guards and kill them. So we have to put you in this solitary right now so you don't try to kill us. And he said something that was really profound, man. He said he was sitting in this new cell with nothing. No artwork, no pencils. He couldn't paint, couldn't draw, he couldn't read. And he said, you know, at first he just cried. And then he thought about it and said, they did me a favor. They freed me of all this stuff. You know, I don't need all that stuff. And he made a promise to himself that, you know, when he gets out of jail, he was going to give himself everything. It's fucking powerful, man. This guy goes from literally having nothing to making a promise to himself that when he gets out of jail, he was going to give himself everything, man. And by everything, he meant a wife, a kids, a house. So he gets out of jail. He ended up moving to England. And he married, you know. He married. He had a couple of kids. And that's right where the documentary ends. But don't take my word for it, man. You should definitely see it. Again, all these things are on Netflix. The Fear of 13, I believe it was called. Really, really good documentary. So, switching gears here, getting away from documentaries, there's another movie I saw. Really, really cool, man. It was called The Invitation. And it's on Netflix. Now, I want to tell you guys about this movie, but I don't really want to ruin it for you, but your boy Rave might kind of ruin it for you, you know what I mean? But you should still see it because it's a lot of different twists and turns. Guy has a new girlfriend, and he gets an invitation from his ex-wife and their new husband to go to their old house And they're having this dinner party, man. And there's a lot of backstory here where you find out that the reason why this guy, let's just call him Steve or whatever, the reason why Steve and his wife divorced was because they had a young child, and the child died in that house, and they just couldn't take it anymore. Now, it's not really a horror story, although it is kind of spookity. So they go back to the house. They're having a dinner party, and this guy, Steve, kind of looks like Tom Hardy, long hair and a beard, Tom Hardy-looking guy. And you can tell he's a little shaken up about going back to that house. You know what I mean? His son probably died, like it was like a accident on the back porch or something like that. And his wife's got a new husband and all that stuff. And they've got all these people at this party. And things are kind of starting to get a little weird and freaky. To make a long story short, he kind of starts saying, something's weird is going on here. Something's weird. Something's freaky. You guys are acting like everything's normal, but something's freaky. And they're like, hey, Tom Hardy-looking guy, you need to calm down. He's like, no, fuck you. Something's weird. And then he, apologizes. But all these weird things keep coming up. Like his wife and her new husband are talking about this religious retreats they go on. And everyone's joking like, oh, you guys joined a cult. And they're like, dude, it's not a cult. Fucking it. Help us find ourselves. Blah, 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 blah. And it's a lot of weird shit going on. That's why you have to see it, man. I'm not going to do it justice. But he's sneaking around the house, and it's his old house, and he's looking at different rooms, and it's triggering flashbacks and shit that he's having. And he thinks that something's up, and he finds a laptop with a message from this sort of religious retreat that his ex-wife has been going to, and it says, tonight's the night, I'm so happy, we're all going to be together. And now he kind of knows that something's up, and he runs downstairs, and the new husband's like, hey, what's your fucking problem? You're ruining everything. Oh, and at one point when they all get to the house for the dinner party, the new husband locks the door. He's got one of those locks where you can lock the door and take the key out. And the Tom Hardy-looking guy's like, hey, that's kind of freaky. I don't know why you did that. Fucking put the key back in. And they're like, all right, dude, calm down. And then they're all sitting around drinking and getting drunk and shit. And, you find out that one guy killed someone, but then he got out of prison, and he was part of this religious group with this Tom Hardy guy's ex-wife and new husband and whatever. They never actually say, find God or anything. It's like almost like a doomsday cult, right? And so every time he thinks that something freaky is going on, they sort of counter it. And you find out that, well, no, maybe he's just paranoid. And you don't really know throughout the entire movie whether he's paranoid or not. But anyway, back to when he finds the laptop with the leader of the sort of cult saying tonight's the night. He goes downstairs and he sees the new husband guy, and he's lighting a red lantern out in the backyard, sort of hanging from a tree. And they all go in, and the Tom Hardy guy's trying to calm himself down. He thinks he's overreacting. He's looking at his wife with her new husband and realizing he still might have feelings for her, and he's got his new girlfriend there. And the whole thing is a really complex and uncomfortable situation to be in, man, right? For all these different reasons. And so the new husband says, we're going to have a toast. And they pour everyone a small glass of wine. And the Tom Hardy guy goes over and starts smacking the wine out of everyone's hand, saying, don't fucking drink it, they're going to poison you. It's like a doomsday cult. And everyone's looking at him like, man, you're fucking crazy, dude. You need to calm the fuck down. You know what I mean? What are you doing? But before he could slap the wine out of this one woman's hand, she starts foaming at the mouth and shit, right? And now something's going on. He's not just crazy and overly, emotional and erratic. And then once that happens, man, the fucking jig is up. And the guy who was talking about how he was in prison for a while, he pulls out a gun and shoots someone in the chest, and then they start running through the house trying to fight for their fucking life and shit. And his new wife ends up getting shot by someone, and everyone's fighting everyone. You don't really know who's in on it and who's not. And his wife, before she dies, or his ex-wife, I'm sorry, before she dies, tells him I couldn't take the pain of our 5-year-old child dying, and that's when I found this cult, and they were telling us that we all need to go and, kill ourselves. And that's why we did this with the wine. I'm so sorry, So anyway, the Tom Hardy guy and his new girlfriend managed to, fight their way out of there and stuff, and the door's locked. And they go out to the back where the husband had previously lit this red-colored lantern and hung it on the tree before he went to serve everyone the poison wine. Like Jim Jones, if you guys remember that guy, Jim Jones poisoned everyone with a bunch of Kool-Aid, and that's where we get the phrase, don't drink the Kool-Aid, right? So it was kind of like that. And they're out there, and they're all bloody, and the Tom Hardy guy got shot in the shoulder, and his girlfriend got kind of stabbed in the leg, and they're all bloody, but they fought their way through this, man, and they made it through it, and you think it's all good, right? And they're standing up in the Hollywood Hills, and they look out in the backyard at all the other houses in the Hollywood Hills. Man, this is the freakiest thing. They see all these other red lanterns lit up around the neighborhood and shit. And then they look, and there's a big building like the Prudential Center, right? And the Prudential Center sort of lit up the lights in the pattern of like a red lantern. Like when the Prudential Center, when the Red Sox are playing, and they'll write "Go Sox" on the side of the on the Pru, And you're like, oh shit! And they reach out and they just kind of hold hands, and then you slowly start to hear like gunshots and screaming and fire trucks and all this different shit, and you realize not only did this guy's ex-wife and her new husband try to poison all 8 of these people at a dinner party, but this was like a message that went out to all of these people that was part of this like sort of new wave doomsday cult. And when they show you the hill of North Hollywood, man, the entire hill of Los Angeles is lit up with these red lanterns, man. Who knows how many, hundreds or if not dozens of people have died, man. That movie's called The Invitation, man. Definitely check it out. One more, then we're going to wrap this up, man, because I got shit to do. Next movie was really good, man. It was a kind of a low-budget movie. It was called Uncanny. I think it's called Uncanny. And if you ever seen Deus Ex, was it Ex Machina? Yeah, it came out a few years ago, where the guy goes to see this dude's cyborg that he had made, and they want to see if this cyborg is lifelike and all that stuff. I believe it was Oscar Isaac played the sort of doctor guy who brings Domhnall Gleeson to his house up in like it's supposed to be Alaska or something to test out this android, and she kind of seduces him. And Ex Machina, you guys have seen it. This movie is kind of like a different side of that movie. It's called Uncanny, where it's a guy who makes an android up in his sort of lab apartment. I think it was like New York. And he invites this woman reporter over to test out this android and ask him questions and shit. And, I don't want to ruin it for you. All right, spoiler alert for the movie Uncanny, because it's a real good movie. They're up there, and the doctor brings out the android, and she's testing it and shit and asking it questions, just like Ex Machina, very similar, right? But the roles are reversed because it's, female checking out the guy android. And it's amazing, what the android can do, and it can do math problems, and it can talk about love, and it talks about how it feels emotion and all this shit. And eventually the woman kind of makes out with the android and shit, right? And, the doctor kind of pretends to not notice this stuff, and it gets really weird. And then at the end, the android starts to get like an attitude with the doctor, like, fuck you, man, what are you doing? And it gets all weird and shit, right? And the doctor's telling the android, hey, stand down. I said stand down. The android's like, fuck you, dude, I'm in love. You programmed me with emotions and shit, blah, blah, blah. Something happens. They start fighting. The woman reporter wakes up, and she sees the android like doing surgery on the doctor, who the inventor of this android, and like she's screaming like, no, I think the android's name was Adam, and she's screaming like, Adam, no, don't do that, you're gonna kill him, fucking don't do it. And then she starts to realize the android's pulling shit out of the doctor, like components and shit, like microchips in a recorder box and all of this crazy shit. And then the android turns to the reporter woman and goes, oh, by the way, the guy who was posing as the creator was actually the android. And the person posing as the android was the doctor who created it. And that was the real test. You know what I mean? So it's really freaky. Like, you don't really know what's going on. And it's like, holy shit, this person was acting like an android the whole time. But he was the doctor. And while the doctor's standing back and having tea with the woman and saying, hey, how was your day? He was the real robot. And that's just how good he did with the artificial intelligence and shit. And he's got the woman kind of tied down to a table because he doesn't want to run out of there and go crazy. And the doctor, the real doctor now, that he kind of says that the jig is up and, I'm the real doctor, and the guy you thought was the doctor was the android. And he starts asking these questions like, how do you think he responded? You know, how'd he do? Anyway, it's really crazy. I kind of spoiled the twist for you. I know that, but definitely check it out. That movie is called Uncanny. And you know what, man? I think I hear it. Just like last week and the week before, man. It's the fucking sun coming up. Where does the time go? Hey, my name's RaveX. This was the RaveX 10-minute podcast, movie edition, right? Thanks, man. Remember something, kids. The mind mistakes talking for doing. My name's RaveX, and I'm out of here.
That was the RaveX 10-minute podcast. Be sure to click like and subscribe. For new music and all things RaveX, go to youtube.com and search RaveX Music.